Hello, everyone. I think I will go ahead and get started today. Welcome to the Garden Hour with MU Extension. My name is Gwen Funk, and I am coming to you from Maryville, Missouri. We have a slightly overcast sky today. We had some rain this morning, and it's heating up today. We had some cooler weather, but I think we're going to be uh, pushing 90 as we go on through the day. So we have quite a bit to talk to you about today. So we'll kind of go ahead, go through with that. And I just want to remind you, here is our map of the field specialists in horticulture that are scattered around the state. You can kind of find your location and match up the color with your person. And if you have a specific question that you need to have addressed. However, we're not really hard and fast with these boundaries. So if you know that Katie is really good with native plants, you might want to reach out to her and ask her about some things about that. Or Donna is really good with cut flowers, so you might want to ask her about something if you have a question specifically about that. We should kind of share all of those questions, and we all have our little niche, and we all try to help out where we can. So that's always good. And then just a reminder that you can watch this live on YouTube. If you just go to YouTube and then type in MUIPM, it should bring up the live stream. You'll also see all of our archived recorded garden hours, as well as some of the snippets that we have that we pulled out just to feature, so you don't have to watch the entire garden hour for a certain topic. You can also subscribe to our garden hour as well. If you look at the picture right down here, you should be able to find information about that. And with that, I think I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Jared, and he can get started with our weather report.
Great, thank you, Gwen. And I think your assessment from Nottoway County applies to most of us today, as it's been a pretty wet start to the morning across the state here. And so before I get into some of the rainfall we've seen this morning, also want to touch on the past couple of weeks, and it's really been an unusual start to August. So August, we typically think pretty hot and humid, maybe some dry conditions as well. But if we look across our major sites across the state here, we see that temperatures so far about halfway through the month are running anywhere from 1 to 4 degrees below normal. So it's really been a cool August so far. A lot of cloudy days, low humidity, and not what we typically expect. And so on the right also, I wanted to show, typically during that first couple of weeks of August, we think of the state fair and it being very hot at the state fair. And if we look at how the state fair has gone so far, we see at the weather station here in Sedalia, Missouri, so far the average high temperature at the state fair has only been 77.8 degrees. So pretty cool. And actually going back pretty far at this station, this is our second coolest start to the fair in Sedalia, behind only 2004. And so maybe some welcome weather for those that are going and spending some time outside. And what we've seen in August is kind of a continuation of July. And so here I've updated Missouri's monthly temperatures departure from average with our July data now. And we do see that July's statewide average temperature of 76.1 degrees Fahrenheit was slightly below average, so about 1.5 degrees below average. And this is really remarkable because we actually broke this streak of warmer than average months. So here you see from February to June, those above average temperatures and the very warm temperatures we saw, especially in the spring in February and March. And even with the cooler temperatures in July, we still are on pace for one of our warmest years on record. So year-to-date temperatures right now are the fourth warmest, but we definitely slowed that down with a cool month here in July. And then looking at the same kind of statewide averages here for precipitation as well, we can see July was really a continuation of this wet pattern we've seen for most of the state since April here. And so Missouri statewide precipitation during July was 5.5 inches, nearly 2 inches above average. So pretty impressive there. And as you can tell from this graph, we're definitely ahead on precipitation for the year. Looking at January through July, we are about, on average across the state, 4.5 inches ahead of normal for that precipitation. So I think most are happy to see a wet year across the state there. But getting into more recent conditions, I'll start here with our 7-day precipitation totals. And I'll also note that these are valid through 7 a.m. Wednesday or this morning. So they haven't caught all of the rainfall from today. But what we see here is really this map just shows our rainfall since about Sunday night into Monday morning. We had a very dry week and weekend, and most of our rainfall has arrived since Sunday overnight. And so we see Northwest Missouri, most of this fell actually getting into Monday morning with the second round this morning. And then Southwest Missouri, most of this rainfall occurred yesterday. And while Eastern Missouri is missing out so far, it's been, for the most part, a pretty nice widespread rainfall where you see these even greens across the state, pretty widespread 1-inch totals. But of course, with thunderstorms in August, we also have some of those higher totals where you see in yellow here as well. But it's still raining for a lot of us here. So if we look at our current radar, we see this large green blob of rain across east central Missouri, some thunderstorms south of Jefferson City, and some lighter showers to the southeast. But look at as this has moved really just kind of east across the state, some spots have picked up some good rainfall totals since midnight here. So these are our Missouri Mesonet stations. And so Columbia here on campus, we've picked up 1.37 inches this morning. Albany in Gentry County, 2.45 inches. And our big winner so far today is Mountain Grove with 3.54. And we might see some more rain later on today and this evening. So we'll have to keep an eye on some of these already impressive totals as of noon today. And if we look at our current watches, warnings, and advisories, no surprise that most of the central part of the state is currently under a flood watch as this rain's been moving through. Where you see the lighter greens here, these are some active flash flood warnings we've got in south central Missouri. So if you're in that area, watch out for some of the flash flooding. And then we can look at this orange here, which is actually right up against that flood watch. And we have a heat advisory mainly for west central and southwest Missouri. So kind of a lot going on with our pattern today. And we'll get into that looking at the forecast here. But also looking on the right here, our U.S. Drought Monitor map that was released last Thursday really shows for pretty much the western half of Missouri, the classification of D0, or where you see these yellow abnormally dry conditions. And so while it's nice that we've kind of gotten ourselves into a wetter week here, this rainfall was needed. Late July and early August, we had 30 days or so where most of the state was getting behind on precipitation. And so even with the rain, still are some pockets of dryness, especially in western Missouri here. But moving forward, I think we're going to really see kind of a continuation of the pattern we've seen today moving forward through the rest of the week. And so I'll start by looking at our temperature map here. And our high temperatures for the day are really variable across the state. And so in eastern Missouri, you can really see where it's just expected to rain and keep those temperatures in the lower 80s and even 80 degrees. But we also see a strong gradient because once we get over to Joplin and Nevada, highs of 95 degrees, so quite different. And so if we look at our weather surface map here on the right, this kind of explains what we're seeing with our weather here. And so if you look, there's a red warm front that's draped across Missouri. And this warm front is really a pretty big divide from some hot and mostly dry air to our south. So it's pretty warm in Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas. And to the north of that cold front, it's been what we've been experiencing. Some of these cooler temperatures, gloomy, kind of wet conditions as well. And so what we've seen since Monday is this warm front not move a lot. So if you're southwest of it, you're getting that heat behind it. But otherwise, storms have been firing along this warm front and slowly moving east. And we actually expect that to keep happening through about Friday of this week here. And so first, I'll start with today, because while we've seen some rain across the state, we are actually expecting another line of storms with the highest probability of those heavier rainfall totals in northern Missouri, and that'll be later this evening. And so we can see this forecast here shows anywhere from these dark blues of a ½ inch to anyway up to 2 inches where you see these purples here. So could see some heavier totals, and we'll need to watch out for potential flash flooding as well. Now, along with some of these storms, where we get some of that heating this afternoon, we'll also have to watch out for the potential for severe weather. And so this isn't something we've seen as much Monday and Tuesday, but with some warmer air, we could see more severe storms tomorrow and today as well. So this is today's risk, which shows a slight risk for severe storms in northwest Missouri, and this is going to be mainly this evening. But if we look on the right, this is a similar risk outlook, but for excessive rainfall. And we see a slight risk of excessive rainfall for nearly the entire state. And so we'll need to watch for flash flooding. And that's why that flood watch is in effect for a lot of central Missouri. And so definitely keep an eye out for severe weather over the next couple of days, although I think rain will be the bigger story. And so let's look at how those rainfall totals would look on Thursday and Friday. And we do see that warm front's kind of moving, but by tomorrow, rainfall is forecasted for all of Missouri, a little lighter to the north and west. But if you're in eastern or east central Missouri, tomorrow is more of your turn for some of these heavier totals. So here again, we see a ½ inch to an inch and a half of rain, really along in south of I-44 there. And then on Friday, maybe the northern half of the state starts to clear out, but still some lingering rainfall in southern Missouri up to a ½ inch. And so really slow moving and kind of rounds of showers and storms until about Friday evening looks to be our forecast here. Now, looking ahead, we really look to flip towards more of a drier pattern over the weekend and maybe stay that way. So these two precipitation forecast maps are for Saturday through Monday on the left. We see green across the state, but really those are some light amounts, maybe up to a 1/10 of an inch. I think that's just some exiting showers Saturday morning. And then we look at Monday through Wednesday on the right, and really no rainfall expected for the state. So a much calmer and drier pattern there. What about temperatures? So after this front kind of moves off, actually our next air mass is going to be kind of stagnant and not really move much. And so Saturday through Tuesday, no precipitation. And if we look at our forecast high temperatures here, it really looks like if you look from map to map, there's almost no changes. And so we'll really see kind of the same forecast every day. And these temperatures, upper 80s to near 90, are really close to seasonal average for this time of year. So pretty normal conditions, or at least within a couple degrees of those, coming through the weekend and into next week. And then I'll end with our kind of look ahead to week 2. And these are the Climate Prediction Center 8 to 14 day outlooks. When we start with temperature, we do see, at least for southwest Missouri, maybe some of that heat to our south starting to push back up into the state. This would be into that week 2. And then if we look on the right for precipitation, not a strong forecast here, just leaning below probabilities for below average precipitation, but maybe an indication that overall this kind of quieter pattern we're expecting at the start of next week will persist. And so could see the return of some drier conditions there. So hope everyone enjoys the rain over the next couple days, and then we can all dry out and enjoy next weekend. So thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, Zach. That was great. And you're absolutely right. The rain was definitely wanted and needed up here in northern Missouri. So we were glad to have it. All right, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some poisonous plants that you might encounter and some of the poisonous plants that we have maybe in Missouri. And probably the one that is most common to you is the poison ivy. And you're probably familiar with the saying, leaves of three, let it be. And it is found statewide. And this little plant, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be little. It has a highly varied growth form. It can be like a small herbaceous little ground cover kind of thing. It can be a vine going up a tree. It can be even a small shrub kind of thing. I know when I was doing botanical work down in the Ozarks, I was looking for shade and I happened to look up and it was a poison ivy vine that was kind of hanging out over that was allowing me to have a little bit of shade in the heat of the summer. But it is very, very common. And like it says, leaves of three is what you want to look for. And normally, so this is a compound leaf, the entire leaf actually it goes all the way back to the stem. The node is right here. And then all of this is just one leaf, but it's divided into leaflets. And in this case, it has three leaflets. And normally what you see is this upper leaf that you have at the very top. It has a little bit longer stem than the two that come out to the side. And these two are going to be mirror images of each other, whereas this one is going to be more symmetrical in shape. On the vine, you'll also see the little aerial roots that will help it grow and climb up things. And then one of the things that I think is unique is that it does have these white berries on it. And those white berries usually will persist through the winter. And actually, if poison ivy is in an area where it's not bothering you, that you don't often walk, that kind of thing, and it's maybe a good thing to leave it. It does provide a lot of forage for insects and birds and animals. So it's good for the environment. It has a place in our environment, but it also can cause that horrible rash. And I know that I was not allergic to it really when I was younger, but I think as I became more exposed to it in my field work, I started to get more and more intense rashes from it. It is an oil that causes the rash, and you do have to, the oil has to be on you actually to get the rash. You can't just look at poison ivy and get it. I know that that's a lot of myths that are out there. It is an oil that is volatile. So if you burn poison ivy, that oil can turn into a vapor and you can get it that way. But usually it's just by contact, and that contact can come from your dog. It can come from your shoelaces. It can come from the bottom of your jeans, that kind of thing. But if you end up with the blisters on your skin, as long as the oils have been washed off, you just by touching that rash, you're not going to transport it to anyone else. And you're also not going to move it from one part of your body to another. It is a contact dermatitis. So you have to have that oil. And since it is an oil, it does wash off with soap and water pretty easily, but I would use cold water instead of hot water, mainly because the hot water helps open up the pores. It helps those bonds between the oil and your skin adhere a little bit more. So using cold water and soap and maybe doing a 3 rinse kind of system to help make sure that you get rid of all of those oils. And wash your shoestrings, wash your tennis shoes if you can. When you're taking your clothes off to put them in the laundry, maybe peel them off inside out so that you're not getting those oils on anything else. But again, it does break down very easily with soap. So the laundry soap should take care of it and it should not spread it in your laundry. So that's a little bit about poison ivy. So I just want to put this picture up here and just, we look at the picture on the right and then the picture on the left. Which one do you think is poison ivy? And you can either drop it in the chat or just kind of put it in your head, either way. Which one should you not touch? And these were growing side by side, by the way, near a building. Well, this is the one here on the left. That one is poison ivy. And you can see how that leaflet that's in the apex has a little bit longer leaf stem. And then it is mostly symmetrical. And then the two on the outside right here, the lateral leaves, they are mirror images of each other, kind of look like mittens. But you can see how this is very small and it's just growing up. This is actually a trumpet vine uh, that is growing nearby. And you can see that this is also a compound leaf. It attaches right back here as the node, but this one is divided up into 5 leaflets. And this is called pinnately compound. And this one is also a good vine to have for wildlife, for hummingbirds, but it can get a little bit invasive and it's a little bit tough to get rid of. All right, let's look at another one. So which one do we not want to touch? I guess I kind of made this a little bit easy because I didn't move the pictures around, but you probably chose this one. Again, this is poison ivy. Anybody know what this one is over here? You can drop it in the chat. I can't see the chat, so I don't know if you are or not, but this one is called Virginia creeper. And I've gone on a lot of nature walks with scout groups, and they always think that this one might be poison oak because it has 5 leaves, but that is not true. This is Virginia creeper. This is a vine that does not cause any kind of issues with anyone. And that brings up the topic of poison oak. We do have poison oak in Missouri, but it is not widespread like poison ivy. And the only documented occurrences of poison oak is down in the very southern part of the state along the Arkansas border and a little bit over in the Boot Hill. But again, it's not found everywhere. And so people up here in North Missouri, we probably are not seeing poison oak at all. It's only poison ivy. And like I said, poison ivy can kind of grow in a lot of different variations. So I can see why people might get a little bit confused about it. But for the most part, only if you're in the extreme southern part of the state will you find poison oak. And then it's pretty rare. It's only mainly found on the glades of rocky outcroppings down in that area, whereas poison ivy can grow in pastures, it can grow in woodland edges, it can grow just about anywhere. All right, let's move on here. All right, can you spot the poison ivy in this picture? This is normally how I end up getting poison ivy because I just kind of end up walking through and I don't look closely and I can't find it or I don't see it because I'm looking at something else. But if you spotted it right here, it's growing among the bedstraw and there's a little dandelion. It looks like a vinca vine that's growing here, maybe some chives in this thing, but there's a lot of stuff going on. But right here, kind of sneaking in, is your poison ivy vine. So if you don't see that, that could get on your shoes. And then when you take your shoes off, you get it on your fingers and then you scratch your face and boom, you've got a little patch of poison ivy on your cheek. That can happen. So if you take off your shoes, it's good to wash your hands and everything before you touch any other part of your body. All right, another poisonous plant that I want to talk about that we see growing in Missouri is poison hemlock. And I've seen this on various social media streams. I tried to find the actual source of this photo, but I was not able to track it down. So I'll just disclose that right now. It was on Facebook, it was on X, it was on Instagram. But we have Queen Anne's lace that is growing prolifically and blooming prolifically right now. We also have maybe some poison hemlock, but poison hemlock is a little bit earlier in the season and it's a much taller plant. Queen Anne's lace might be 2 to 3 feet in height, whereas poison hemlock can grow up to 6 feet. But you want to be careful. You don't want to just go and start touching the plant because it's a contact dermatitis that can cause some issues and you certainly don't want to ingest it. So when you're looking at poison hemlock, some things to look at, it will have a smooth stem and you can kind of see that right here. And also you will have the purple splotches on it. That is pretty indicative of your poison hemlock. The blooms are also just more spread out. If you look at Queen Anne's lace over here, the umbel is more compact And often, it doesn't show it here, but there's a little purplish black flower right dab in the center of that. And that will help you. And it's just a very delicate, it kind of waves in the breeze really easily, where hemlock is just a much more coarse looking plant. So we don't want to touch poison hemlock. That one's the one that we don't want. So these are some pictures of Queen Anne's lace, and this one kind of shows you the little black flower floret that's right in the center. And they'll start to kind of cup up like a bird's nest also when they start to form. And the stems on Queen Anne's lace are going to be solid, whereas on poison hemlock, they are hollow. And then you can also see the hairs on Queen Anne's lace as well, where poison hemlock is not. And then here's again some poison hemlock, and you see it's just a much more dense, coarse looking plant. You can see the purple splotches on the stem, and you can see that the umbel flowers are just much more spread out than what you see in Queen Anne's lace. If in doubt, don't go up and touch it, because there are many lookalikes that you just don't want to run the risk of getting a rash or something like that. So in summary, I guess, mainly we have the poison ivy that we don't want to deal with and the poison hemlock. We also have, you may have heard of poison sumac, but poison sumac is not in Missouri. We do have wing sumac and smooth sumac and fragrant sumac, but the poison version does not grow in Missouri. So hopefully that'll help you a little bit with dealing with some of our poisonous plants. And now we are going to go to Donna, and she is going to talk to us about tea gardens.
Real quick, I have one question for you, Gwen.
Sure.
Can your pets get poison ivy or spread it? And I think you answered part of that.
Yes. So yes, the pets, I get it poison ivy off of my cats and my dog both. So if they go through it, I usually give them a bath. I don't think that they actually get a rash from that, but that would be something maybe to talk with your vet about. I'm not 100% sure on whether or not they would get the rash. I know it is eaten by deer. I know that it's eaten by birds. And obviously, I think they would not go back and eat it if if it wasn't compatible with them. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, Donna, are you ready?
Yeah. All right. So this is probably a growing favorite topic of mine. I do have a lot of people that ask me all about what can you put in a garden. Well, this is one theme that we see a lot of chatter about on some of the social media, and that is how to have a tea garden and what plants work well in a tea garden. Well, I will say this. When we talk about tea garden plants, it's not like the teas that you would find on the grocery store shelves. It's not going to be your black, your different types of tea. This is going to be more like your herbal teas. It's not going to be the black teas. And so just keep that in mind. You may not have the same coloring. You may not have the same taste, but there are a lot of plants that you can use in your garden to have tea. So that's what I'm going to cover today. Let me see if I can get this going. There we go. All right. So the first one that a lot of people hear a lot about is the chamomile. And this is one that has become popular over the years because it induces sleep, or it helps you to relax and in the evening, and helps to bring on sleepiness. And so it's a really good one to have in the garden. A cute little white and yellow blooms. 1 tablespoon of fresh in a teapot, or 2 teaspoons dried flowers, and then you steep it for 5 to 30 minutes. And when we talk about steeping is heating the water up to a point, and then you allow the herbal material to sit there in the warmed water for a certain amount of time. Typically, if you don't want it real strong, you don't let it steep very long. If you want it a lot stronger, then that's when you would do it up to 30 minutes for some things, not all things. Another one that we hear a lot about is lavender. We have such a lavender craze that goes on, and I will admit, I like lavender. It's one of those I'm a little crazy about. Once again, it's a type of herbal that brings on relaxation and sleep. So once again, it's something for in the evening. 1 teaspoon of dry flowers or 2 teaspoons of fresh flowers. If you noticed in all these slides, when you use fresh, you're going to use 2 times the amount or 3 times the amount. When we use dry, since it's the flavor is condensed and the oils are condensed, we're actually having to use less. And so just keep that in mind. The other thing I might mention about lavender is some people don't like it. Some people think it tastes like soap. And so just be careful if you want to try lavender in a tea, be careful on how much you put in. More is not better on lavender. It goes a long way. So keep those blooms to a minimum. You might just try maybe a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon the first time. If it's too much, the flavor's too much, you might dilute it. If it's not enough, you may add a few more blooms or let it steep longer. But yes, it is a very popular one for teas. Rosemary makes it a really nice tea. It has, once again, it has a lot of oils in it, so it's very strong. So this one is a half a teaspoon of dry or 1 teaspoon of fresh. And you steep to taste, and it doesn't take very long, so I wouldn't go over 5 minutes, definitely, and I wouldn't put very much because you do not want strong tea. You want a light tea when it comes to rosemary. You can do any type of roses, and you're going to be either using the flowers or the hips. And if you use the flowers, you want to use 1 teaspoon of dry or two teaspoons of fresh. If you go the hips, you want to have them dried and ground to a powder, and then this would be 1 teaspoon. We have calendula or calendula. It just depends on how you want to pronounce it. This one actually is a little spicy and slightly bitter. If you've ever eaten one on a salad, you'll know what I mean by that spicy taste. You can use calendula, but make sure that you don't steep it very long. But it has a beautiful bloom, it makes a beautiful garnish, and try it. It may be a nice tea for you. One I really like is lemon verbena or lemon balm. I love a lemon tea, and both lemon verbena and lemon balm will have that big, robust lemon flavor. And so you can mix it with black tea or you can leave it alone. If you leave it alone, it's not going to develop that color that you will get with a black tea. Just remember that. So if it still looks a little light and you want to steep it longer, just remember it's not supposed to. You're just picking up the flavor and not necessarily the coloring. If you do just the verbena or the lemon balm by itself, make sure it's 1 teaspoon of dried leaves or 3 teaspoons of fresh leaves. This is one of them you want to steep for 15 minutes to get the maximum flavor. You can use any mint you want for a tea. And, mints are known as the pick-me-ups when it comes to teas. So it sort of livens you up. So you need to wake up. Let's add a little bit of mint to your tea. So there's orange mint, peppermint mint, pineapple mint, strawberry mint, chocolate mint. I mean, there's gobs of different mints out there. But if you choose to grow the mints, just remember they get out of control. So put them in a pot. And even when they're in a pot, they can get a little out of control. But 1 teaspoon of dried leaves, 3 teaspoons of crushed leaves, or, and then once you get that in your teapot, you want to just steep to taste. So it could be 5 minutes or it could be 15 minutes based on how strong you want that flavor. Bee balm. Now, when we talk about bergamot in a tea, because the scientific name for bee balm is bergamot. But in the tea world, when they talk about bergamot, they're actually talking about a small little orange. And so when you're reading those orange tea boxes, just remember, this is not the bergamot they're talking about. The bergamot we have that we grow natively, any of it can be used. They're spicy leaves and flowers. They do taste a bit like orange bergamot, but not necessarily exactly like it. Try it. Some people love it, and some people are, I want to stay with my other bergamot teas. 1 teaspoon of dry flowers or leaves. You want to simmer 5 to 15 minutes for a clear dark tea. And so I hear a lot of people growing bergamot just for their teas. You can actually use basil. I was surprised about this. And this gives a spicy clove-like taste. Now, remember, there's all sorts of basils out there. You know, we have cinnamon basil, we have lemon basil, lime basil, we have Queen Siam, we've got the Thais. You know, there's so many basils out there. So it might be one of those things that you would like to experiment to see what the different flavors hold. So, but this is talking about just the sweet basil. And so once again, spicy clove-like taste, which sounds really yummy. So I was going to try it this weekend. So you can do 1 teaspoon dried crushed leaves or 3 teaspoons of crushed fresh leaves. Like I said, if you've noticed, it's typically a 1 to 3 ratio. So it's 1 dried to 3 fresh. In some instances, it's a 1 to 2 ratio. But just remember, fresh you're going to use a little more, whereas dried you're going to use less. One shrub that some of us are growing that works also for tea is New Jersey tea. The leaves are delicious. This is one that a lot of the natives were using, and a lot of the colonials were using this as a tea source, especially when tea was scarce. It has a black tea flavor, but there's no caffeine, which is nice. So if it's one that you're growing in your yard, I know I have a couple of plants, you can try it. And once again, it's the leaves that you're harvesting, whether it's fresh or dried. And just remember, you know, if you choose to use these leaves, a lot of people do it a couple different ways. They might have a teapot where they stick the leaves in, they fill it with hot water that's came to a boil, but it's no longer boiling. And then you let that teapot sit for 5 to 15 minutes like we talked about. The other way that you can do is you can get one of the little mesh balls that the tea leaves go into. And so you can pack that the mesh ball with the tea leaves, and then you can just drop that mesh ball into your teacup, and you let it steep that way. They do make disposable tea bags that you can buy and are relatively easy to use. So many different ways to do it. And most of these plants, they grow like many of our other garden plants. There's no real special way to do it. All you're doing is growing and collecting leaves and then using them for tea. So I hope that all of you get a little courage and try some of these interesting plants for tea. So that's all I have. Back to you, Gwen.
One question, Donna.
Okay. Right.
What are rose hips?
Rose hips are what is left after the petals fall from the rose bloom. And so a lot of people will go through once the petals have fallen off the blooms, and they will cut off the hips and they will dry them down and then use them.
Okay, perfect. I love New Jersey tea. I just like it just in the garden. I think it's a neat little plant to have. So next we have Katie. Some of you might be having some issues with your squash plants right now. So Katie is going to talk a little bit about why is my squash plant wilting? Katie?
Okay, so I got this call in the last week, and I also grow a lot of pumpkins and have had a lot of experience with this. And several of these pictures you will see are current pictures that I just took in my pumpkin patch or in my volunteer patch. These are all volunteers. So here's a couple examples. You can see the one on the right is really wilting down. You actually see squash on it, but it's really wilting nicely. And the one on the left, you know, that one branch is kind of yellowish. It's not really too wilty, but it's pretty yellow and kind of looks a lot different than the vine on the left side of it. So when I examine a little closer, you notice at the base of the stem, you can see the looks kind of like sawdust coming out, and the stem kind of looks brown. It just doesn't look normal on the left. And then on the right, this one looks really bad. It's got lots of sawdust. It looks like it's split open. And so what causes that? Here's another stem you can kind of see. And then you notice this white looking grub here. The picture's not real clear, but if you break open that stem, this is the culprit. It is squash vine borer. And so the adult lays the eggs on the base of the stem, and then the eggs hatch out and they bore into the stem, which is where you see what we call that sawdust or frass that they're boring in. And basically, as a borer, they are eating inside that stem. So they are really hard to get to. So a lot of times if I see a wilting plant, I'm going to go pull it up and go after those borers. So you can see those there. And here's some more pictures. These are ones I took last night. So I saw another one wilting in my pumpkin patch. I pulled it out, and this one, he's down the stem there, you can see. And there were actually 3 of them in this stem. So those 3 were the ones I pulled out of that stem. And these are large enough, they had been there long enough that they probably weren't too close or were pretty close to getting ready to transition to an adult. So I kind of take great delight in pulling those out and squashing them. And here is what the adult looks like. They are a clear wing moth, so rather pretty actually. But not something I like to see in my pumpkin patch. So that's what the adult looks like. They also can kind of be scary looking because while they are a moth, they almost look like they might be a wasp or something that might sting. And so you got this problem. What do you do about it? Well, typically I have a pocket knife in my pocket, and if I catch it early enough, sometimes I will take my knife and cut into the stem and either cut them out or slice through them. And sometimes that stem will heal. So that's what you're seeing here. The stem had been attacked and it had healed. Also, I've heard in home garden situation that it can work to take a corsage needle, so a long needle, and poke through the stem in numerous spots to actually stab through your favorite torture technique for that insect that's bugging you. Stab through that larva. Another thing is that some varieties of squash are a little more resistant. So butternut squash actually has some more resistance to squash vine borer than like some of your Hubbard squash or your acorn squash. They can withstand it a little better. There are some spray options or insecticide options. The problem is that once they are inside that stem, we really don't have any options other than our stabbing them or picking them out because they are protected inside that stem. So you'd have to go after the adults or go after eggs laid on the stem. So that's hard to do. In my personal patch, I play a numbers game. They can't get them all. If I plant enough, they can't get them all. Rotation can also help, and doing different things like that. But sometimes squash vine borer can be pretty devastating, and also knowing what to look at for those adults. And in some cases, I've heard home gardeners, they will protect the base of that stem and with a cardboard collar or tin foil or different things so that the larva can't bore in and the adults don't want to lay their eggs there. The other thing is, in some cases, if you pumpkins will send out aerial roots or roots at nodes. So in some cases, they can part of the vine might die, but the rest of the vine may be fine because they have a different root system or additional root systems that can help them out. So that is one of the pests that is always bugs me. I always get calls in the summertime, and just recently had a call. And then I started looking closer in my patch and noticed that this year seems particularly bad for squash vine borer. That's all I have.
Okay, do we have any questions about that little critter?
Not seeing any.
Not seeing any either. Okay, let me pull up. Okay, so I am going to talk. Katie, thank you for that. I appreciate I battle those as well. So thank you for those tips. And I am going to talk to you about moon gardens. So kind of taking on or continuing on with theme gardens here. Just a second. All right, so we're talking about twilight gardens. And what twilight gardens do, or moon gardens, they basically use the reflected light of the sun that's being reflected off the surface of the moon to help illuminate your garden. And this is just a way to maybe extend your gardening pleasure on into the evening. Our garden may be bright and sunny and joyful and all of this during the day, but then maybe at night, if you have some certain plants that are planted there, it can transform that into a very still, tranquil, peaceful kind of habitat. So we'll just kind of talk a little bit about this. So the idea of moon gardens, it's not necessarily new. Back in the 1830s, Benjamin Poore created a moon garden where he made everything white. So all of his plants were white or had white blooming flowers. They had variegated white leaves or silvery leaves. He even went as far as to put white statuary in his garden, as well as white cattle and white goats and white chickens and white dogs. So a lot of people kind of thought that that was a bit eccentric. But what he was doing basically was using that white color to reflect and illuminate the moon's glow to help just the visual appreciation of the garden in the evening. And then in 1930s, I'm not sure if it's Vida or Vita, Sackville West, was a poet in England, Kent, England, and she and her family acquired Sissinghurst Castle, and it was kind of run down, and she ended up redesigning some of the gardens and became rather famous for her moon garden, where she put everything, all the plants again, as white blooming or silvery leaves, that kind of thing. And then you can see this image from Vaughn's catalog from the 1888, and this is courtesy of the Chicago Botanical Garden, where you can see again the white statuary, the white vining plants, the white border along the sidewalk there, just as a way to kind of extend gardening pleasure into the evening. And then also I was reading about a trend in the 70s. They called them cocktail gardens. Again, kind of using this time of night where the light is becoming more dim. I've always heard of it as the gloaming, where things start to kind of glow, but they would design these gardens for maybe an evening drink, whether it's an adult beverage or just iced tea. But they would come home from their day of work, maybe be a little tense, and then they could go out into their garden and have their little cocktail and just kind of help relieve the stress of the day. So that was also kind of a trend that built on the moon garden idea. Your main color palette that you want to use, you want to think white, silver, and gray. So I was just walking around my neighborhood. I was looking at some plants, and obviously the white variegated hostas with the white flowers or pale flowers would work in a moon garden. You could also use the white snapdragons that are here, or the sweet alyssum. The sweet alyssum will also put out just kind of a nice little fragrance. It's a very soft fragrance. And that's one of the things you want to look for too in your moon garden, because we aren't necessarily using sight as our stimulus, but we want to maybe engage some of the other senses like sound and smell, texture maybe. So the white alyssum here would be good. And then this is the limelight hydrangea that some people have growing in our neighborhood that's kind of bordering their home. All of these would capture some of that sunlight, or sorry, the moonlight, and kind of start to glow in the twilight. The most famous flower is moonflower. You may have seen this, and it again has a very nice scent in the evening. It's not overpowering, but again, it's just something that will kind of add another dimension to your garden. It stays closed during the day, and that's what you see right down here. The blooms stay closed. And then about twilight, a little bit after that, is when they start to open it. And these are about the size of your hand. I mean, the blooms are huge. And you can see they have kind of this little star shape texture that's inside. And then they just open up and then they close back up. And I think they're only, Donna or Katie, you may have to correct me on this, but I think that they only last that one day. I don't think they reopen again for another day. And then you also have the little seed pod that I think is kind of interesting just in itself for during the day, just as some interest for the day garden as well. These will vine and can grow up trellises as well. So that makes them kind of an interesting plant to have. When you're designing your moon garden, you want to put it in a place where it will capture some of the moon glow. So maybe kind of out in the open, maybe just a little bit, but also maybe have it a little bit closer to a patio or your outside areas where you might go in the evening, or maybe outside of a window where if you open it up, your window open during the evening, it can kind of waft in some of those soft scents. It might be good also to add like some sound, like a soft wind chime, or maybe a water trickle and a water fountain. If you have a water pond, a water feature, you might think about putting white water lilies in it. That could work. Other fragrant plants like thyme or lavender might work in that. And then also you want to keep your lighting very soft. We are maybe encouraging some pollinators, night pollinators, when we have a nighttime garden or a moon garden. So keeping your lights soft so we don't confuse them. Use maybe an amber colored light rather than a blue type light. But you also want to think about walking hazards. So if you have uneven pathways, you might want to consider a light there. And then also maybe have a comfortable seat so that you can sit down and relax and just have a nice tranquil experience. One of our native flowers that would be great to have for nighttime pollinators is Missouri evening primrose. And it is kind of a yellow flower. And we have common primrose as well that grows in Missouri. But the Missouri evening primrose is one that it is just a huge flower. It's just really stunning. And I have this growing over a retaining wall, and it just kind of spills down over the retaining wall, and it's really, really nice. And again, these are some of the most essential plants that we have for our native pollinators. So adding that in can give you kind of a double benefit of providing a nice little tranquil place for you, but also helping our pollinators as well. And that is all that I have. So,
okay, Gwen, we had a couple kind of same question actually, so several people ask it. The moonflower looks like Jimson weed, and Jimson weed is poisonous to horses, cattle, also people. So comments?
If I recall, and you guys will have to help me with this, but I believe that they are related, like maybe in the same family.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And so kind of like tomato, and tomato is also in the nightshade family. And tomatoes don't really cause a problem, but you're right. Gypsum weed and some of those others may cause, belladonna is another one that's in that family that can cause some problems. So, yeah.
And I will say, while the flower smells good, the plant itself does not.
Yes, when you bruise the leaves, it's like, eh. I agree. All right.
Somebody else also commented that they use night blooming nicotina as well.
Yes, that would be another one as well. And I think, yes, that was dropped in the chat. Dave Trinkline had a publication a while back that lists several plants that you can use. I just featured some of the ones that I could take pictures of in my neighborhood. All right, let me go back to, I think we are, Katie, did you have some hort terminology for us?
Do a terminology real quick and then we'll be finished. All right, the terminology today, tender perennial. So if Jerry can share the poll, we can guess. So A is a perennial that is harvested when it is young and tender to eat. A perennial that is planted in the ground after the threat of frost is past. A perennial that can't survive the winter in colder climates. So looks like there's some answers. Give it a little bit. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So the majority of you said C, a perennial that can't survive the winter in colder climates. And that is correct. Although I would say it would also be correct that you could, it's also one that's planted in the ground after threat of frost is passed because it is tender and will not withstand that frost. So we have quite a few tender perennials that we do use in the garden. If we were in a warmer climate, these are perennials that would or would stick around, but we plant a lot of perennials as annuals, or in some cases we figure out ways to protect them. So the picture here of caladiums, which are a corm, so we can dig those corms and store those over winter and plant them again. I just leave mine in the pots, let the pots dry out, and put those in the basement and then bring them out in the springtime. Some other examples, geraniums, lantana, tomatoes are actually a perennial, but we grow them as an annual. Begonias, basil. So there's lots and lots, and there's more than just these that are tender here. And in some cases, we can maybe take them in or protect them, do different things, or take cuttings and have some for next year. That's all I've got.
Wonderful. All right, folks, we are wrapping up our time.
Gwen, we can barely hear you.
I don't know why. Is that better? No? Not sure what's happening. Can you hear anything yet?
Here, yes.
Okay. I'm not sure what happened there. All right, let me go ahead and get this up. So again, we do run weekly from noon to 1 p.m. However, I want you to mark it on your calendars. We will not have garden hour on August 28th. And we'll send a reminder out about that. But just so you kind of have a note, so that you know what's coming up. August 28th, there will be no garden hour, mainly because we will all be in a workshop in Columbia. So we will not be able to present that day. But you can continue to submit your questions to the garden hour at the address that you see here at the bottom of your page, and we will try to address those the best that we can throughout the state. And then just to remind you, I'm losing all my buttons here, sorry. If you found some of the links to be helpful, you might want to save the chat. Those were all posted there and dropped in as we were giving the presentations, and you just go to your chat, open the chat, go to the three little dots at the top, and if you click that, a little drop down will show up, and you can just save the chat, and it will save in a Zoom file on your computer. So I know sometimes that's a little bit hard to find, but it will be there. And then also just a reminder that we have horticulture specialists that are found around the state. Feel free to reach out to the one in your county, or really any of us. We are happy to help and answer any questions that we can. And with that, we will see you next week. We certainly appreciate your time, and we are so thankful that you chose to spend your time with us today. So go out and enjoy the weather. Have a great day. Thanks.